pretend to be my wife," begged Billionaire. The champagne glass slipped from her trembling fingers. It shattered against the marble floor, 1,000 tiny pieces scattering like broken promises across the pristine white surface. The sound cut through the ballroom like a gunshot, and for one terrible moment, every eye in the room turned toward her. She stood frozen, a waitress in a borrowed uniform, a nobody surrounded by everybody. And across that sea of silk gowns and tailored tuxedos, a man was staring at her with eyes that held something she had never seen before in the face of a billionaire. Desperation. His lips moved, forming words she could not hear over the sudden roaring in her ears. But she read them anyway. 2 words. 2 impossible words that would change everything. Help me. Hello, family. Welcome to another story that will grip your heart and refuse to let go. Before we dive in, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you never miss a story. Drop a like if you believe in second chances, and share this with someone who needs to hear that love can find you in the most unexpected places. Trust me, you are going to want to stay until the very end of this one. Because what starts as a lie becomes the most beautiful truth you have ever witnessed. Now settle in, get comfortable, and let me take you back to the night everything changed. The Ashford Hotel stood like a monument to excess in the heart of Manhattan. 47 floors of glass and steel reaching toward a sky that never got dark enough to show the stars. Tonight, its grand ballroom hosted the kind of gathering that made ordinary people feel like ghosts. 300 guests swirled beneath crystal chandeliers that cost more than most houses. Their laughter echoed off marble walls. Their champagne sparkled under lights designed to make everyone look 10 years younger and infinitely richer. Naomi Carter moved through them like a shadow. She adjusted the black bow tie at her collar for the 100th time, her fingers brushing against fabric that felt wrong against her skin. The catering uniform was a size too large, borrowed from a coworker who had called in sick. The shoes pinching her feet had cost $12 at a thrift store 3 days ago. They were already coming apart at the seams. Just like her life. She balanced a tray of champagne flutes on her left palm, weaving between clusters of people who looked through her as if she were made of glass. A woman in a red gown that probably cost more than Naomi's yearly salary reached for a glass without breaking her conversation, without even glancing at the hand that offered it. "Thank you," the woman said, but she was not speaking to Naomi. She was speaking to her companion about summer plans in the Hamptons. Naomi moved on. Her feet throbbed. Her back ached from hours of standing. But she kept moving, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering why she was here in the first place. $400. That was what tonight would pay her. $400 for 8 hours of being invisible. $400 that would cover exactly 1/3 of her brother's medication for the month. The math never worked. It never had. But she kept trying anyway, because the alternative was giving up, and Naomi Carter had never learned how to do that. Her phone buzzed against her thigh, a vibration she felt through the thin fabric of her uniform pants. She glanced around quickly. The event coordinator, a severe woman named Mrs. Patterson, had made it very clear that phones were forbidden during service. But Mrs. Patterson was currently on the far side of the ballroom, berating a busboy for using the wrong napkin fold. Naomi slipped behind a massive floral arrangement and pulled out her phone. The screen glowed with a text message from her brother Marcus. "Got the test results back. Need to talk when you get home." Her heart stuttered. She typed back quickly, fingers trembling slightly. "Good news or bad?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. The pause stretched into an eternity. "Just call me." Naomi stared at those 3 words until they blurred. Just call me. Not good news then. Good news did not require a phone call. Good news could be texted in all caps, with 17 exclamation points. Just call me meant something else entirely. It meant brace yourself. It meant I do not want to say this in writing. It meant everything you have been fighting for might not be enough. She shoved the phone back into her pocket and pressed her palm against her chest, trying to slow the racing of her heart. Not now. She could not fall apart now. She had 4 more hours of invisibility to perform, $400 to earn, a mountain of bills to pay. The tears would have to wait. She picked up her tray and rejoined the current of servers flowing through the ballroom. Smile, offer, move on. The rhythm was automatic now, mechanical, the kind of motion that required no thought and therefore no feeling. But feeling found her anyway. It crept in through the cracks of her composure every time she caught a snippet of conversation. Did you hear about the Maldives trip? We are thinking of buying the vineyard, just as an investment. The new yacht should be ready by spring. These people lived in a different universe, one where money was not a daily calculation of survival, but a game to be played for entertainment. One where test results did not mean choosing between treatment and rent. One where the biggest worry was whether the champagne was properly chilled. Naomi had stopped envying them a long time ago. Envy required energy, and she had none to spare. What she had instead was endurance, the kind that came from years of being the one who held things together. After their mother died when Naomi was 19 and Marcus was 12, she had become everything. Parent, provider, protector. She had dropped out of art school 3 weeks into her sophomore year because someone had to work, and Marcus had to finish growing up, and dreams were luxuries that poor people could not afford. 7 years later, here she was, 26 years old, serving champagne to strangers, praying that $400 would be enough to keep her brother alive for 1 more month. The ballroom had grown warmer, more crowded, louder. Naomi felt the walls pressing in. She needed air, just for a moment, just long enough to remember how to breathe. She deposited her empty tray at the service station and slipped through a side door marked staff only. A narrow corridor led to a service exit, and beyond that, a small balcony overlooking the hotel's private garden. The November air hit her like a slap, cold and sharp and exactly what she needed. She leaned against the stone railing and let her eyes close. The sounds of the party faded to a distant hum. Out here she could almost pretend she was somewhere else. Someone else. A version of Naomi who had finished art school and was showing her paintings in galleries instead of serving drinks at them. But that Naomi did not exist. Maybe she never had. She pulled out her phone again, staring at Marcus's message. Just call me. Her thumb hovered over his name. She should call. She should find out whatever terrible news was waiting. But she could not make herself tap the screen. As long as she did not know, there was still hope. Schrodinger's diagnosis. Her brother was both okay and not okay until she opened the box. The glass door behind her opened and closed. Footsteps crossed the stone. Naomi straightened quickly, shoving her phone away. If Mrs. Patterson had found her out here, she would be fired on the spot. $400. Gone. She spun around, an apology already forming on her lips. But it was not Mrs. Patterson. A man stood at the edge of the balcony light, half in shadow, half illuminated by the glow from inside. He was tall, over 6 feet, with the kind of posture that came from a lifetime of being watched. His tuxedo fit him like it had been sewn directly onto his body, every line precise, every angle sharp. Dark hair swept back from a face that might have been carved from stone. High cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, eyes so dark they looked black in the dim light. He was, objectively, the most beautiful man she had ever seen. He was also clearly not supposed to be out here. I am sorry, Naomi said automatically, her server instincts kicking in. This area is for staff only. If you need something, I can direct you back to the main ballroom. The man did not move. His eyes swept over her, not with the dismissive glance of the guests inside, but with something more intense, more searching, like he was looking for something specific and was not sure if he had found it. You worked this event, he said. It was not a question. Naomi nodded slowly, a strange unease prickling at the back of her neck. Yes. He took a step closer, and she caught the scent of something expensive and masculine. His hands, she noticed, were shaking slightly. The tremor was barely visible, but it was there. The hands of a man trying very hard to appear calm and failing. What is your name? The question caught her off guard. In 4 years of catering events like this, not a single guest had ever asked her name. Naomi, she said cautiously. Naomi Carter. He nodded once, as if she had confirmed something he already knew. Then he glanced back toward the ballroom, and she saw it clearly now. The tension in his shoulders, The tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched and unclenched like he was grinding his teeth to dust. This man was not just nervous. He was terrified. "What is going on?" she asked, her wariness sharpening into genuine concern. "Are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it, just a short, bitter sound that seemed to surprise even him. "Call someone," he repeated, shaking his head. "No, there is no one to call. Everyone in that room wants something from me, and the ones who do not want something want to destroy me. Which brings me to you." Naomi took a small step back. She was suddenly very aware that she was alone on a dark balcony with a stranger who was clearly in some kind of crisis. Her fingers itched toward her phone. "Look," she said carefully, "I do not know what is happening, but I should probably get back inside." "Wait." He held up a hand, palm out, a gesture of surrender. "Please, I know how this looks. I know how I sound. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to hear me out before you decide I am insane." She should have walked away. Every instinct told her to turn around, go back inside, and forget this entire encounter. But something in his voice stopped her. A crack in the composure. A glimpse of something raw and real beneath the polished exterior. "Fine," she said slowly. "You have 30 seconds. He took a deep breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was low and urgent, barely above a whisper. "I need you to pretend to be my wife, just for tonight. Just for the next few hours. I will pay you whatever you want. Name your price, and I will double it. But I need you to walk back into that ballroom on my arm and convince everyone in that room that you are Mrs. Ashford." Naomi stared at him. The words hung in the cold air between them, impossible, absurd, the kind of thing that only happened in movies or fever dreams. "I am sorry," she said. "Did you just ask me to pretend to be your wife?" "Yes." "Your wife?" "Yes." "And your name is Ashford?" "Derek Ashford," he confirmed. "And yes, before you ask, this is my hotel. My family's hotel. Every person inside is here because I invited them, and half of them are hoping I fail spectacularly before dessert is served." The name clicked into place. Ashford. Derek Ashford. She had seen his face on magazine covers, on business news segments, on the massive portrait hanging in the hotel lobby. CEO of Ashford Industries, real estate mogul. One of the youngest billionaires in the country. And he was standing in front of her, hands trembling, asking a waitress to pose as his wife. "This is insane," Naomi said flatly. "I know. I mean genuinely, certifiably insane. You want me, a woman who has been serving you champagne all night, to suddenly become your wife? In front of all those people? People who probably know you, who have met you, who would immediately recognize that I am not whoever they think you are married to." "I am not married," Derek said. "That is the point. I have never been married. Which means no one in that room knows what my wife looks like, because she does not exist. Until tonight." Naomi shook her head slowly, convinced now that she had somehow stumbled into an elaborate prank. "Why? Why would you possibly need a fake wife?" Derek's expression hardened. His eyes flicked toward the ballroom again, and this time Naomi saw something else there, not just fear, fury. "Because there are people in that room who want to take everything from me," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "People who have been circling for months, waiting for a sign of weakness. And the weakness they have been looking for is exactly this, the fact that I am alone, that I have no one, no family, no partner, no one who would fight for me if everything went wrong." Naomi frowned. "I do not understand." Derek ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect styling. "My father died 6 months ago, heart attack. He left me the company, but he also left me enemies. People who think I am too young, too inexperienced, too alone to hold on to what he built. There is a man inside right now, Victor Hale, who has been trying to stage a hostile takeover for years. My father kept him at bay, but I—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "Victor knows I have no one, no wife, no family, no heirs. If something happens to me, the company goes to the board, and he has already bought half of them. He is in there right now, telling everyone who will listen that I am unstable, isolated, a liability, and he is right. He is right about all of it. The desperation in his voice was so raw that Naomi felt it in her own chest. She had worn that same expression in the mirror too many times to count. The look of someone fighting a battle they were not sure they could win. "So you need a wife," she said slowly, "to prove you are not alone." "I need a wife to prove I have a future," Derek corrected, "to prove I am building something, not just holding on to what my father left behind. To prove that someone, anyone, believes in me enough to stand beside me. And you picked me because you are the only person here who does not know me? Who does not want anything from me? Who has no reason to lie?" "Everyone has a reason to lie," Naomi said quietly. Derek met her eyes, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. The wind picked up, rustling through the bare branches of the garden below. Inside, the orchestra began playing something slow and melancholic. Then he said something that changed everything. "I saw you on the phone earlier. Saw your face when you read that message. Whatever it was not good news." He paused. "I do not know what you are fighting for, Naomi Carter, but I am guessing you could use $400,000 more than 400. Naomi felt the world tilt beneath her feet. 400,000, she repeated, certain she had misheard. "Deposit it into your account by morning. All you have to do is walk back into that ballroom on my arm and let me introduce you as my wife. For 3 hours. That is it. 3 hours." She thought about Marcus, about the test results waiting for her at home, about the bills piled on her kitchen counter, each one a different shade of urgent. She thought about the medication that costs more every month, the treatments that might not be covered, the future that looked more and more like a wall she was about to crash into. $400,000 would not solve everything. But it would solve enough. It would buy time, it would buy treatment, it would buy her brother a fighting chance, and all it would cost was a few hours of pretending. "This is crazy," she said, but the word had lost its force. "What if someone recognizes me? What if they figure it out?" "They will not," Derek said, and there was something like hope flickering in his dark eyes now. "You were invisible in there. That is not an insult. It is exactly what I need. Someone no one noticed. Someone no one remembers." "Gee, thanks." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. It softened him somehow, made him look less like a magazine cover and more like a real person. "I mean it as a compliment," he said. "You move through that world without leaving the mark. That takes skill, that takes practice. Most people spend their whole lives trying to be seen. You have mastered the art of being overlooked. Do you have any idea how valuable that is?" Naomi looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Behind the tailored perfection, behind the confidence, and the money, and the famous name, she saw something she recognized. Loneliness. The kind that did not come from being alone, but from being surrounded by people who did not see you. Not really. She knew that loneliness intimately. It had been her companion for 7 years. Maybe that was why she said what she said next. 1 hour. Derek blinked. "What?" 1 hour, Naomi repeated, her voice steadier now. "Not 3. 1 hour. I walk through that ballroom with you, smile, shake hands, do whatever it is trophy wives do, and then I disappear. I go back to being invisible, and you go back to being whoever you pretend to be in front of those people." Derek studied her face. 1 hour is not enough to. It is what I am offering. Take it or leave it." A long pause. Then Derek nodded slowly. 1 hour. "And the money?" Naomi hesitated. $400,000. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life, more than she could comprehend. But something held her back from demanding it all, some stubborn piece of pride that refused to be bought so easily. 100,000, she said, for 1 hour. Derek raised an eyebrow. "You are negotiating down?" "I am negotiating fairly. 1 hour is not worth $400,000. It is barely worth the humiliation of whatever is about to happen when someone figures out I am a fraud. No one will figure it out. You do not know that." "I know you," Derek said quietly. "Or at least, I know enough. I know that you are smart enough to keep your mouth shut in a room full of sharks. I know that you are desperate, but not the kind of desperate that makes mistakes. And I know that you are standing here negotiating with a billionaire instead of running away screaming, which means you have nerves of steel even if you do not know it yet." Naomi did not have a response for that. She was too busy trying to figure out if he was right. Derek pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. Then he showed her the screen. A banking app, a transfer pending, her name somehow already filled in. 100,000, he said. Transferred the moment you agree. Another 100 when the hour is over. And if you decide to stay longer, we can renegotiate. 200,000 for 1 hour, Naomi said slowly. For 1 hour of being the most important person in that room. She looked at the screen. The numbers glowed back at her, surreal, impossible. Then she looked at Derek Ashford, Billionaire CEO, the man who had everything except someone to stand beside him. I do not even know you, she said. You will, he replied. By the end of tonight, you will know me better than most people in that room ever have. She did not know why she believed him. Maybe it was the look in his eyes. Maybe it was the desperation that mirrored her own. Maybe it was just the exhaustion of fighting alone for so long. The seductive fantasy of someone else carrying the weight, even if only for an hour. Whatever it was, it made her say the word that changed everything. Okay. Derek exhaled like he had been holding his breath since the conversation began. Okay, he repeated, and this time the smile reached his eyes. Then we need to move fast. You cannot walk in there looking like that. Naomi looked down at her ill-fitting catering uniform, her scuffed second-hand shoes, and almost laughed. What gave it away? Come with me, Derek said, already moving toward a side entrance she had not noticed before. There is a car waiting, and a dress. And about 45 minutes to turn you into someone no one in that room will ever forget. Naomi followed him, her heart pounding with something that might have been terror or excitement or both. Wait, she said as they reached the door. If I am supposed to be your wife, I should probably know some basics. How did we meet? How long have we been married? Do I have a job? A hobby? A personality? Derek paused, his hand on the door handle. He looked back at her with an expression she could not quite read. We met at a charity gala, he said slowly. 3 years ago. You were an art student. I was looking for something beautiful. We got married quietly, privately, because we both valued our privacy. You paint. You have a studio in our home that no one is allowed to enter. And your personality. He studied her face for a long moment. Your personality is exactly what it is right now. Sharp, skeptical, unimpressed by money. That is why I fell in love with you. Naomi's breath caught. The words were rehearsed, clearly. A backstory invented on the spot for a fictional relationship. But somehow, the way he said them made her heart do something strange. That is, detailed, she managed. I am good at stories, Derek said. Now come on, we have 43 minutes to make this believable. He pushed open the door and stepped into the night. After a moment's hesitation, Naomi followed. The cold air wrapped around her like a second skin. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine hummed to life. The ballroom glittered behind her, full of people who would soon be told a beautiful lie. She did not know it yet, but this was the last moment of her old life. In 43 minutes she would be someone else entirely. Someone who existed only in Derek Ashford's desperate imagination. And somewhere between the lie and the truth, she would find something she had stopped believing in a long time ago. Love. Real, terrifying, life-changing love. But that part of the story comes later. First, she had to become a wife. The Mercedes was waiting at the service entrance, black and sleek and completely silent. The driver did not look at Naomi as she slid into the back seat beside Derek. He simply pulled away from the curb the moment the doors closed, as if he had been expecting exactly this. Where are we going? Naomi asked, watching the hotel shrink in the side mirror. Maison Celeste, Derek replied, already typing something on his phone. Best boutique in the city. They know me. They will have something ready. It is almost 11 at night. They will be open. Of course they will, Naomi muttered, because that is how your world works. One phone call and doors just magically unlock. Derek glanced at her sideways. You could sound a little less disgusted by that. I could, but I will not. The ghost of a smile crossed his face again. Fair enough. They rode in silence for a few minutes. The city flowed past the tinted windows, all neon and shadow, the kind of beautiful that only existed when you were not part of it. Naomi watched it blur and wondered what she was doing. $100,000 was already in her account. She had felt her phone buzz with the confirmation. In 1 hour, there would be another 100,000. That money would change everything. It would pay for Marcus's treatment. It would clear the debts that had been strangling her for years. It would give her room to breathe for the first time since she was 19 years old. All she had to do was lie. The car pulled up to a storefront on a street Naomi did not recognize. The sign above the door was simple, elegant, Maison Celeste in gold script. The windows were dark, but as they approached, a light flickered on inside. "They know you," Naomi said flatly. "They know money," Derek corrected. "Same thing." The door opened before they reached it. A woman stood in the entrance, tall, thin, dressed entirely in black. Her expression was carefully neutral, the kind of blankness that came from years of serving people who expected miracles and punished disappointment. "Mr. Ashford," she said with a small nod, "everything is prepared." "Thank you, Claire," Derek said. He placed his hand on the small of Naomi's back, guiding her inside. "We have about 40 minutes." The boutique was a fever dream. Naomi had never seen so much silk in one place. Gowns hung from invisible hooks, arranged by color, each one more beautiful than the last. The lighting was soft and golden, designed to make everything look like it belonged in a museum. "This way," Claire said, already moving toward a private room at the back. Naomi followed in a daze. The door closed behind her, and suddenly she was surrounded by options. 3 gowns waited on mannequins, one red, one black, one deep burgundy that seemed to shimmer between colors when the light caught it. "Mr. Ashford suggested the burgundy," Claire said, "but of course, the choice is yours." Naomi approached the burgundy gown slowly. Up close, it was even more stunning. Delicate beadwork traced the neckline, catching light like captured stars. The fabric was soft and heavy, the kind that would move like water against her skin. "This is the one," she said quietly. 20 minutes later, she barely recognized herself. The gown fit like it had been made for her, hugging her waist, flowing to the floor in a cascade of burgundy silk. Her hair had been pulled into a loose updo, a few strands left free to frame her face. The makeup was subtle, but transformative, emphasizing her cheekbones, darkening her eyes, turning her into someone who looked like she belonged in ballrooms instead of serving them. She stared at her reflection in the floor-length mirror, and for a moment, she forgot to breathe. The door opened behind her. Derek stepped in, and then stopped. His reflection appeared in the mirror beside hers. For several seconds, he did not speak. "You look," he began, and then stopped. "Like a believable wife?" Naomi supplied, trying to keep her voice light. "Like someone who has always been this," Derek said quietly. "You just forgot." The words landed somewhere in her chest, uncomfortable and warm. She turned away from the mirror. "We should go," she said. "The clock is ticking." Derek nodded slowly, but his eyes lingered on her for a moment longer. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "One more thing," he said, opening it. The ring inside caught the light and threw it back in 1,000 directions. A diamond, large but not garish, set in a band of white gold. It looked old, important, real. "This was my mother's," Derek said. "She left it to me when she passed. I have never had reason to use it before tonight." Naomi shook her head. "I cannot wear that." "You can, and you will." He took her hand gently and slid the ring onto her finger. "It fit perfectly. If you are going to be my wife, you need to look like it." Naomi stared at the diamond on her hand. It felt heavy, not just the weight of the stone, but the weight of everything it represented. A lie, yes, but also something else. Something that made her heart beat faster than it should. "Ready?" Derek asked. Naomi looked up at him, at this stranger who had dragged her into an impossible situation, at this billionaire who had everything except someone to stand beside him, at this man whose eyes held the same loneliness she saw in her own mirror every morning. "Ready," she said, and they walked back into the night. The ballroom looked different from the inside now. Before, it had been a maze of obstacles, a space to navigate without being noticed. Now, as Naomi walked through the gilded doors, on Derek Ashford's arm, it felt like a stage. Every chandelier a spotlight, Every guest an audience member. Every whispered conversation a review she had not yet earned. She felt Derek's hand tighten slightly on her elbow as they descended the short staircase into the main room. "Breathe," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear, "and smile. They are already watching." He was right. The room had shifted the moment they appeared. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to painted lips. Eyes traveled up and down Naomi's burgundy gown, cataloging every detail, calculating every possible explanation for this woman on Derek Ashford's arm. And then the whispers began. "Is that? Who is she? I have never seen her before. Did he say wife?" Naomi kept her chin high and her expression serene. Inside, her heart was trying to break through her ribs and escape into the night. But outside, she was porcelain, cool, untouchable. A woman in emerald green approached them first, her smile bright and sharp as a blade. "Derek, darling," she said, kissing the air beside his cheek. "You have been hiding from everyone. And who is this stunning creature?" "Caroline," Derek said smoothly. "May I introduce my wife, Naomi Ashford?" The woman's eyes flickered with something, surprise, suspicion, jealousy, before her smile returned at full wattage. "Your wife?" she repeated, savoring the words like they tasted bitter. "How deliciously unexpected. I did not even know you were seeing someone." "We value our privacy," Naomi said, speaking for the first time. "The fewer people who know, the fewer opinions we have to hear." Caroline's smile faltered for just a moment. Then she laughed, a tinkling sound that did not reach her eyes. "Oh, I like her," she said to Derek. "She has teeth." "She does," Derek agreed. "It is one of many things I love about her." The word love hung in the air between them. Naomi felt it brush against her skin, warm and dangerous. She reminded herself it was a script, a story, a carefully constructed lie. But her heartbeat was not following the script at all. The next hour unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Derek led her through the crowd, introducing her to faces she would never remember and names that meant nothing to her. She smiled. She nodded. She offered vague answers to probing questions and deflected curiosity with practiced ease. Somewhere along the way, she stopped being terrified and started being something else entirely. She started being good at this. The role fit her like the gown, like the ring, like the hand that rested at the small of her back, warm and steady, guiding her through the chaos without ever letting go. By the time they reached the center of the room, Naomi had stopped thinking about the money. She had stopped thinking about Marcus and the test results and the mountain of bills waiting at home. All she could think about was the way Derek's thumb traced small circles on her wrist when no one was watching, the way his voice dropped half an octave when he spoke to her, the way he looked at her like she was the only real person in a room full of ghosts. It was a performance. She knew that, but the performance was starting to feel like something else. And then Victor Hale appeared. He emerged from the crowd like a shark breaking the surface, tall, silver-haired, a face that might have been handsome once before it settled into permanent lines of calculation and contempt. His eyes were the color of winter, and they fixed on Naomi with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Derek," Victor said, his voice smooth as oil, "I have been looking for you all evening, and this must be the mysterious woman I have been hearing about." He extended his hand to Naomi. His grip, when she took it, was cold and too tight. "Victor Hale," he said, holding onto her fingers a moment longer than necessary. "I have known Derek since he was a boy. His father and I were close." "So I have heard," Naomi replied, extracting her hand. "Derek speaks of you often." "Does he?" Victor said, glancing at Derek with something like amusement. "All good things, I hope." "Enough to know your name," Naomi said sweetly, "but not enough to remember your face." Beside her, she felt Derek's shoulders shake with silent laughter. Victor's smile thinned. "You have quite the bride here, Derek," Victor said. "Where on earth did you find her?" Naomi did not give Derek a chance to answer. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "He found me at a party much like this one," she said. "I was the only person in the room who was not trying to sell him something. It was refreshing, I suppose, for both of us." Victor studied her for a long moment. His eyes moved over her face, her dress, the ring on her finger, calculating, searching for cracks. He found none. Well, he said finally, stepping back, I suppose congratulations are in order. I did not even know Derek was seeing anyone. We prefer to keep our private life private, Derek said. A concept you have always struggled with, Victor. The jab landed. Victor's smile turned brittle. Indeed, he said. Well, I look forward to getting to know Mrs. Ashford better. We should have dinner soon. Just the three of us. We would love that, Naomi said, her voice dripping with sincerity she did not feel. I am sure it will be illuminating. Victor held her gaze for one more moment. Then he nodded curtly and disappeared back into the crowd. The moment he was gone, Derek let out a breath. You, he said quietly, are terrifying. Is that a compliment? The highest one I know how to give. Naomi allowed herself a small smile. He was testing me. He was, Derek agreed. And you passed. Most people crumble under Victor's stare. You made him crumble instead. Is that why you needed a wife? To fight your battles for you? Derek looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Softened. No, he said. I needed a wife because I forgot what it felt like to have someone standing next to me instead of behind me. Or worse, in front of me with a knife. The words were raw, honest. They did not sound like a performance at all. Before Naomi could respond, the orchestra began playing something slow, a waltz. Couples drifted toward the dance floor, drawn by the melody like moths to flame. Derek held out his hand. Dance with me, he said. It was not a question. I have not danced in years, Naomi said, even as her hand was already moving toward his. Neither have I, Derek replied. We can be terrible together. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. He led her onto the dance floor, and suddenly the rest of the room fell away. There was only the music, the light, and the man whose eyes had not left her face since the moment she stepped out of that boutique. They began to move. Naomi stumbled slightly on the first turn, and Derek caught her easily, pulling her closer. I told you, she murmured. 2 left feet. Then stop trying to lead, he said softly. Let me. She did. She let herself be guided, let the rhythm carry her, let herself forget that this was supposed to be a transaction. The music swelled around them, and for a few perfect minutes nothing existed except the warmth of his hand on her waist and the steady beat of his heart that she could feel through the fabric of his tuxedo. Why did you stop? Derek asked suddenly. Stop what? Dancing. You said you have not danced in years. Why? Naomi considered the question. It deserved an honest answer, even in the middle of a lie. I stopped having reasons to dance, she said quietly. When my mother died, everything became about survival. There was no room for this. Derek was quiet for a moment. Then he said, when my father died, I stopped too. Stopped dancing, stopped smiling, stopped believing that anything could be beautiful again. And now? He looked down at her, and his expression made her breath catch. Now I am dancing with someone who reminds me why I started in the first place. The music reached its final notes. They slowed, stopped, but Derek did not let go of her hand. The hour is almost up, he said softly. You can leave if you want. I will have a car take you home. The money is already in your account. Naomi looked around the ballroom, at the glittering gowns and calculating smiles, at the predators circling and the prey unaware, at Victor Hale, watching them from across the room with narrowed eyes. Then she looked back at Derek, at the loneliness hiding behind his composure, at the hope flickering in his eyes like a candle in a hurricane. She thought about her brother, waiting at home with test results she was afraid to hear. She thought about the money that would change everything. She thought about walking away and never seeing this man again. And then she made a decision that surprised both of them. The hour is up, she said slowly, but the night is not. Derek blinked. What do you mean? She said, I think Victor Hale is still watching us, and I think leaving now would look suspicious. So maybe I should stay a little longer. The hope in his eyes caught fire. How much longer? Naomi smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she had worn all night. Let us find out. The night deepened. The party wound on, and Naomi Carter, waitress, art school dropout, nobody from nowhere, found herself dancing through a world she had never imagined entering. She was introduced to senators and celebrities, CEOs and socialites, She shook hands with people whose net worth could fund small countries. She laughed at jokes that were not funny and complimented dresses that were not flattering, and all the while Derek Ashford stayed by her side, his hand on her back, his voice in her ear, his eyes meeting hers across crowded conversations, a silent check-in, a quiet reassurance that she was not alone. By midnight she had stopped counting the money. By 1 in the morning she had stopped thinking about the lie. By 2, when the last guest finally stumbled out and the chandeliers began to dim, she realized something that terrified her more than anything Victor Hale could have said. She did not want to leave. The ballroom was empty now, the orchestra had packed up, the caterers were clearing the last of the champagne flutes. Naomi stood by the tall windows, looking out at the city sprawled beneath her, a galaxy of lights she would never own. Derek appeared beside her, 2 glasses of water in his hands. He offered her one. "No more champagne?" she asked. "I thought we could both use something real," he said. Naomi took the glass. The water was cold and clean, and she drank half of it before she realized how thirsty she had been. "You are incredible tonight," Derek said quietly. "I do not know how to thank you." "You already paid me," Naomi pointed out. "That is not what I mean." She turned to look at him. In the dim light, the sharp edges of his face had softened. He looked younger, tired, human. "What do you mean, then?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment, staring out at the city. When he spoke again, his voice was low. "Before tonight, I had forgotten what it felt like to have someone in my corner. Someone who was not there for the money or the power or the name. Someone who was just there." "I was there for the money," Naomi reminded him. "That was the whole point." At first, Derek agreed. But somewhere between the first dance and the last introduction, you stopped being a hired performer and became something else. "What?" He looked at her. "A partner. Even if it was only for a few hours." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to unpack. Naomi set down her water glass. "I should go," she said, and her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Hoarse, reluctant. "My brother is waiting for me." Derek nodded slowly. He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "The car will take you home," he said. "And Naomi, thank you for everything." She nodded, already moving toward the door, but something made her stop. Something made her turn back. "Derek," she said. "Yes?" She hesitated. 1,000 questions crowded her tongue. Why me? What happens now? Will I ever see you again? Is any of this real? But what came out was something simpler, smaller, safer. "Good luck," she said. "With Victor. With the merger. With all of it." Derek smiled, and it was the saddest smile she had ever seen. "Good luck to you too, Naomi Carter, with whatever fight you are facing." She turned and walked out of the ballroom, down the corridor, through the lobby, out into the cold November night where a black car waited with its engine running. She did not look back. She could not afford to. But as the car pulled away from the Ashford Hotel and the city blurred past her window, she felt the ring still heavy on her finger. She had forgotten to return it. Or maybe, she thought, as the first tears finally spilled down her cheeks, she had not forgotten at all. The apartment was dark when Naomi finally arrived home. She climbed the 4 flights of stairs slowly, her feet aching in borrowed heels, the borrowed dress rustling against her legs like a whispered accusation. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open and found Marcus sitting on the couch, illuminated by the glow of his phone. He looked up when she entered, and his eyes went wide. "Holy crap," he said. "What are you wearing?" "Long story," Naomi replied, kicking off the heels. "Tell me about the test results." Marcus's expression shifted. The humor drained away, replaced by something fragile and careful. "Come sit down," he said. Naomi did not move. "Just tell me." A long pause. Then, quietly, he said the words that would echo through every moment that came after. "The treatment is working," he said. "But they found something else, another mass, in a different location. They want to do more tests, but, He stopped, swallowed. "Naomi, they are not sure how much time I have." The room tilted. The floor rushed up to meet her. And Naomi Carter, who had spent the entire night pretending to be someone she was not, finally stopped pretending altogether. She fell to her knees and wept. Because $400,000 could not fix this. Because no amount of money could buy time that was running out. Because somewhere in that glittering ballroom, she had started to believe that maybe her luck was finally changing, and now she knew the truth. The universe did not give people like her happy endings. But as she knelt there on the cold floor of her crumbling apartment, still wearing a billionaire's mother's ring on her finger, she made a decision. She was gonna fight anyway. For Marcus. For herself. For the future she refused to let anyone take away. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse that had never felt emptier, Derek Ashford was staring at his phone, at Naomi Carter's name, at the message he wanted to send but could not find the words for. He did not know about her brother, did not know about the diagnosis, did not know that the woman who had saved him tonight was drowning in her own storm. All he knew was that for the first time in years, he had felt something real. And now she was gone. He set down the phone, poured himself another drink, and stared out at the city that suddenly seemed colder than it had ever been. Miles away, Naomi finally pulled herself up from the floor. She wiped her tears, squared her shoulders, looked at the ring still glittering on her finger, and she made a choice. She was going to see him again, not for the money, not for the lie, but because in that ballroom, for those few impossible hours, she had felt something too. Something that might be worth fighting for. The question was whether Derek Ashford felt the same. Naomi Carter had just learned that her brother Marcus was running out of time. She was still wearing the ring that Derek Ashford had slipped onto her finger. And somewhere across the city, a billionaire was staring at his phone, wondering if he would ever see her again. The night was over, but the story was just beginning. 3 days passed. 3 days of hospital waiting rooms, and insurance phone calls, and paperwork that multiplied like a virus. 3 days of watching Marcus pretend to be fine while his eyes told a different story. 3 days of Naomi trying to hold the world together with hands that would not stop shaking. The money from Derek sat in her account, untouched. $200,000. Enough to cover treatments, specialists, second opinions. Enough to buy time that suddenly felt more precious than gold. But every time she looked at the number on her screen, she thought of him, the way his hand had felt on the small of her back, the way his eyes had softened when he watched her dance, the way he had said partner like it meant something more than a business arrangement. She had not returned the ring. It sat on her nightstand now, catching the morning light, a constant reminder of a night that already felt like a dream. She told herself she would mail it back. She told herself she would find his address and send it with a polite note. She told herself a lot of things. But the ring stayed where it was, and so did the memory of the man who had given it to her. On the 4th day, her phone rang. She was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, pushing a sad salad around a plastic container, when the screen lit up with an unknown number. Normally, she would have ignored it. Debt collectors had a way of finding her, no matter how many times she changed her number. But something made her answer. Hello? Naomi. The voice was familiar, deep, careful. Is this a bad time? Her heart stopped, then started again, faster than before. Derek? I was not sure you would answer. She pushed away from the table, suddenly aware of how loud the cafeteria was, the clatter of trays, the murmur of exhausted families, the constant beeping of machines somewhere in the distance. How did you get this number? A pause. I have resources. Of course you do. Another pause, longer this time. Then he said, I need to see you. Naomi closed her eyes. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The salad wilted in its container. And somewhere down the hall, her brother was lying in a hospital bed, waiting for test results that might tell them exactly how much time he had left. I cannot, she said quietly. Not right now. Why not? The question was simple. The answer was not. She could have lied. Could have made up an excuse about work or family obligations or simply not wanting to see him. But something about his voice, about the rawness hiding beneath the composure, made her tell the truth instead. I am at the hospital, she said. My brother is sick, really sick, and I cannot leave him right now. Silence on the other end. She could hear him breathing, processing, recalibrating whatever script he had prepared for this conversation. Which hospital? he asked finally. Derek, you do not have to. Which hospital, Naomi? She told him. She did not know why, maybe because she was tired of carrying everything alone. Maybe because his voice sounded like something solid in a world that kept shifting beneath her feet. Maybe because, despite everything, she wanted to see him again. I will be there in 20 minutes, he said. And then the line went dead. He arrived in 18. Naomi saw him before he saw her. He stepped out of a black car at the hospital entrance. And even in jeans and a simple gray sweater, he looked like he belonged to a different world. Heads turned as he walked through the automatic doors. Nurses paused mid-conversation. A woman in the waiting area actually dropped her magazine. Derek Ashford did not belong in a place like this. A place of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells, and families slowly falling apart in plastic chairs. He was too polished, too perfect, too much of everything this place was not. But he came anyway. Naomi stood as he approached, suddenly conscious of her own appearance. She had not slept properly in 3 days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her clothes were wrinkled from too many hours in waiting room chairs. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman barely holding on. Derek stopped in front of her. His eyes moved over her face, cataloging every detail, every sign of exhaustion and fear. You look terrible, he said. Despite everything, she almost laughed. Thank you. That is exactly what every woman wants to hear. I did not mean, he stopped, ran a hand through his hair, started again. I mean, you look like you have not slept in days, like you have been carrying something too heavy for too long, like you need someone to help you hold it. The words landed somewhere deep in her chest. She blinked against the sudden sting in her eyes. Why are you here, Derek? Because you answered the phone, he said simply, and because you sounded like you needed someone to show up. She did not know what to say to that. So she said nothing, just stood there in the middle of a hospital waiting room, staring at this impossible man who had somehow walked into her life and refused to leave. Tell me about your brother, Derek said quietly. And so she did. They sat in the corner of the cafeteria, away from the noise and the crowds, and Naomi told him everything. About Marcus. About the diagnosis that had come when he was 17. Just a kid with dreams of becoming an architect. About the years of treatment and remission, and treatment again. About the phone call 3 days ago that had shattered everything she thought she knew. The cancer is back, she said, her voice steady even as her hands trembled around her coffee cup. They found a new mass, different location. They are running more tests, but the doctors, she swallowed hard, the doctors are not optimistic. Derek listened without interrupting. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes did. A deepening, a darkening. The look of someone who understood loss in ways that words could not capture. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you need?" Naomi shook her head. "I did not tell you this so you would fix it." "I know, but I am asking anyway. What do you need?" She thought about the question, really thought about it. Not the surface answer, not the polite deflection, but the truth that lived beneath all of it. "I need time," she said finally. "Time for the treatments to work. Time for the doctors to figure out what they are dealing with. Time to convince myself that he is going to be okay, even when everything suggests he is not." Derek nodded slowly. Then he pulled out his phone and typed something she could not see. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Making some calls," he said. "I know people. Specialists. Researchers. People who owe me favors, and people who just want my money. If there is a treatment that could help your brother, I will find it." Naomi stared at him. "Derek, you cannot just—" "Yes," he said, meeting her eyes. "I can, and I will, unless you tell me to stop." She should have told him to stop. Should have insisted on handling this herself, the way she had handled everything for the past 7 years. She did not need a billionaire's charity. She did not need to be saved. But looking at him now, at the determination in his jaw and the gentleness in his eyes, she realized something. This was not charity. This was not obligation. This was something else entirely. "Why?" she whispered. Why are you doing this? Derek set down his phone, leaned forward, held her gaze with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. Because 3 days ago, he said quietly, you walked into a ballroom and made me feel like I was not alone for the first time in years. You did not have to do that. You could have taken the money and given me exactly what I paid for, but instead you gave me something real, something true. He reached across the table and took her hand. His fingers were warm against her cold skin. You asked me once what I need, he continued. I need someone who sees me, not the name, not the money, me. And for 3 hours in that ballroom, you were the only person who did. Naomi felt the tears building behind her eyes. She had spent so long being strong for everyone else, so long pretending she did not need anyone, so long convincing herself that asking for help was the same as admitting defeat. But sitting here, in this fluorescent wasteland, with this impossible man holding her hand like she was something precious, she felt something crack inside her. I do not know how to let people help me, she admitted. I know, Derek said, but maybe you could learn. The next 2 weeks were a blur of hope and terror. True to his word, Derek made calls, pulled strings, moved mountains. Within days, Marcus had appointments with specialists who normally had year-long waiting lists. Within a week, he was enrolled in an experimental treatment program that Naomi had never even heard of. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. The treatment was aggressive but promising. There were no guarantees, but for the first time since that terrible phone call, Naomi allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her brother might survive. Derek was there through all of it. He showed up at the hospital every day, sometimes for hours, sometimes just long enough to bring coffee and sit with her in silence. He did not push, did not demand, did not try to define whatever was growing between them. He simply showed up, again and again, until showing up started to feel like a language all its own. On the 15th day, Marcus was released from the hospital. The first round of treatment had gone well. He would need to return for regular sessions, but for now, he was stable. Tired, but stable. Naomi walked him out to the car that Derek had sent, a sleek sedan with a driver who looked like he could double as a bodyguard. Marcus stopped on the sidewalk and turned to her. So, he said, grinning weakly, are you going to tell me about the billionaire? Naomi felt her cheeks flush. There is nothing to tell. That is why he has been here every single day. That is why he paid for my treatment. That is why you have been wearing his mother's ring around your neck like a secret. Naomi's hand flew to her chest, where the ring hung on a thin chain beneath her shirt. She had not realized Marcus had noticed. It is complicated, she said. Marcus laughed, then winced at the pain it caused. It is always complicated with you, Naomi. But here is the thing. He stepped closer, his expression softening. You spent 7 years taking care of me. Maybe it is time to let someone take care of you. He is a billionaire, Marcus. He lives in a completely different world. So? Marcus shrugged. You spent 3 hours in that world and made it yours. I saw the pictures, by the way. You were everywhere. Jamal Blackwood's mystery bride. That is what they are calling you. Derek, Naomi corrected automatically. His name is Derek. Marcus grinned. See? You even know his real name. That is more than the tabloids have figured out. He climbed into the car, moving slowly, carefully. But before the door closed, he looked back at her one more time. Do not let fear make your decisions, Naomi. That is what Mom used to say. Remember? Naomi remembered. She remembered everything about her mother, including the way she had looked at the end, pale and small in a hospital bed, not so different from the one Marcus had just left. She had held Naomi's hand and told her to be brave, to live fully, to love without holding back. Naomi had not listened, not really. She had spent the years since then building walls instead of bridges, protecting herself from a pain that found her anyway. But maybe it was not too late to change. That evening, she went to see Derek. His penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building that had its own name, something pretentious with Roman numerals. The elevator required a special key that Derek had given her 2 weeks ago, just in case, he had said. She had never used it. Until now. The doors opened directly into his living room, a vast space of floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture and art that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. Derek was standing by the window, his back to her, staring out at the city that spread beneath him like a carpet of lights. He turned when he heard her footsteps. Naomi. Her name in his mouth still did something to her, a flutter in her chest, a catch in her breath, a feeling she had been trying very hard not to name. She crossed the room slowly, aware of every step, every heartbeat, every inch of distance between them shrinking. Marcus is home, she said. He is stable. The doctors think the treatment might actually work. Derek nodded. I know. They sent me the reports. Of course they did, because this was his world. A world where information flowed to him like water downhill. A world where obstacles simply dissolved because he willed them to. A world that still felt like a dream she might wake up from at any moment. I came to say thank you, she said, for everything, for the doctors, for the treatment, for showing up. Derek shook his head slowly. You do not owe me thanks. Yes, I do. You saved my brother's life. That is not nothing. He stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something warm and woody that made her think of autumn leaves and fireplace smoke. I did not save his life, Derek said quietly. The doctors did that. The treatment did that. Your brother's own stubborn will to survive did that. All I did was open a few doors. That is still more than anyone else has ever done for me. Then everyone else was a fool. They stood there, barely a foot apart, the city glowing behind them like a million tiny witnesses. Naomi could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the slight rise and fall of his chest as he breathed, could count the individual threads of silver in his dark eyes. I should return this, she said, reaching for the chain around her neck. The ring. I have had it for almost 3 weeks. Keep it. Derek, I cannot. Keep it, he repeated, his voice dropping to something softer, more intimate. It looks better on you than it ever did in a safe. She shook her head. It was your mother's. Yes, and my mother would have wanted it to belong to someone who understood what it meant. What does it mean? Derek reached out and traced his finger along the chain until it rested against the ring, warm against her collarbone. It means that some things are worth more than money, he said. It means that love is not a transaction. It means that the person wearing this ring is someone I trust with everything I have, including my heart. Naomi's breath caught. Derek. I know this is fast, he continued. I know we barely know each other. I know that 3 weeks ago, you were a stranger serving champagne, and I was a desperate man looking for a lie to tell. But somewhere between then and now, the lie became true. At least for me. He cupped her face in his hands, gentle, reverent, like she was something fragile that might shatter at too harsh a touch. I am not asking for anything, he said. I am not demanding a commitment or a promise or a label. I am just asking for a chance. A chance to prove that what started as a performance could become something real. Naomi stared at him, at this impossible man who had crashed into her life and refused to leave, at this billionaire who had sat with her in hospital waiting rooms and held her hand while she cried, at this guarded, wounded soul who was offering her the one thing money could not buy. Himself. She thought about all the reasons to say no, the differences between their worlds, the complications that would inevitably arise, the fear that still lived in her chest, whispering that people who loved her had a habit of leaving. Then she thought about her mother's words, do not let fear make your decisions. And she made a choice. She reached up and placed her hand over his, pressing his palm more firmly against her cheek. I do not know how to do this, she admitted. I do not know how to let someone in. I have spent so long building walls that I am not sure I remember how to take them down. Then let me help, Derek said, one brick at a time, however long it takes. What if it takes forever? He smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Then I will be here forever, he said, waiting, hoping, showing up. She rose onto her toes, pressed her forehead against his, breathed him in. This is crazy, she whispered. I know. We barely know each other. I know. This could end badly. It could, he agreed, or it could be the beginning of something neither of us ever expected. She pulled back just far enough to look into his eyes. What she saw there made her decision for her. Hope, vulnerability, a longing so deep it mirrored her own. She kissed him. It was not like the kisses at the gala. Those had been performances. calculated displays of affection for an audience that no longer mattered. This was different. This was soft and slow and terrifyingly real. His lips moved against hers like a question, and she answered with everything she had. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, both trembling, Derek pressed his forehead against hers and laughed softly. "I should warn you," he said. "I am terrible at relationships." "So am I," Naomi replied. "Maybe we can be terrible together." He kissed her again, and this time neither of them came up for air for a very long time. The next 3 months were the happiest of Naomi's life. She and Derek fell into a rhythm that felt both impossible and inevitable. He introduced her to his world properly this time, not as a prop or a performance, but as his partner, his equal, his choice. The press went wild. The mysterious Mrs. Ashford was back, and this time the story was real. Photographers followed them everywhere. Tabloids speculated about wedding dates and prenuptial agreements and whether she was pregnant. The noise was relentless. But inside the noise, there was quiet. There were Sunday mornings in Derek's kitchen, where he attempted to make pancakes and she laughed at his failures. There were late nights on his balcony, wrapped in blankets, talking about everything and nothing. There were visits to Marcus, who was responding well to treatment, who was gaining weight and color and hope. There were also the harder moments. The moments when Derek's walls went up and he retreated into silence. The moments when the weight of his father's legacy crushed down on him and he forgot how to breathe. The moments when Victor Hale circled closer, sensing weakness, looking for cracks. But Naomi was there through all of it, holding his hand, holding the line, holding him together when he could not do it himself. She started painting again. Derek had set up a studio for her in the east wing of his penthouse, a sun-drenched room with floor-to-ceiling windows and canvases stacked against every wall. She spent hours there, losing herself in color and texture and the pure joy of creating something from nothing. Her work had changed. It was rawer now, more emotional, less concerned with technique and more concerned with truth. She painted the hospital waiting room, all harsh angles and fluorescent despair. She painted Marcus's smile on the day he came home. She painted Derek's hands, strong and gentle, reaching for something just out of frame. A gallery owner saw her work at a small show and offered her a solo exhibition. Naomi said yes without hesitating. The night of the opening was warm for March. Spring was fighting its way through the last grip of winter, and the city felt alive with possibility. Naomi wore a dress the color of champagne silk. Derek stood beside her in a dark suit, his hand warm and steady on her back. The gallery was packed with strangers who had come to see her art, her truth, her heart laid bare on canvas. She had titled the exhibition Unmasked. The centerpiece hung in the center of the room, larger than all the others. It showed a man standing at the edge of a balcony, hand extended toward someone just out of frame. The colors were dark and moody, blues and grays swirling together like storm clouds. But reaching toward him from the edge of the canvas was a single hand, illuminated in gold, stretching through the darkness. She had titled it Almost. Derek stood in front of it for a long time, not speaking. When he finally turned to her, his eyes were bright. "Is this us?" he asked quietly. Naomi nodded. "It is who we were, before." "And now?" She smiled and took his hand. "Now we are something else." The exhibition was a success. Critics praised her raw, emotional honesty. Collectors competed for pieces. By the end of the night, nearly everything had sold. But Naomi barely noticed. She was too busy watching Derek, who had spent the entire evening introducing her to everyone as his partner, his love, his future. She had never felt so seen. And then Victor Hale made his move. It happened on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the exhibition. Derek came home late, his face pale, his movements stiff. Naomi knew immediately that something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, rising from the couch where she had been reading. Derek did not answer at first. He walked to the window and stood there, staring out at the city, his reflection ghost-like against the glass. "Victor called a board meeting," he said finally. "Emergency session. He has been buying up shares quietly for months. He has enough votes now to force me out." Naomi felt the floor tilt beneath her. "Force you out? They cannot do that." They can if they convince the board that I am a liability. He turned to face her, and the desperation in his eyes reminded her of the night they met. That I am too emotional, too distracted, too attached. The word hung between them. Attached, Naomi repeated slowly. He is using me against you. He is using everything against me. You, my father's death, the fact that I actually seem happy for once in my life. He laughed bitterly. Happiness is a weakness in his world. Love is a weapon to be exploited. Naomi crossed the room and took his hands. So what do we do? Derek shook his head. I do not know. For the first time in my life, I genuinely do not know. She squeezed his fingers. Then we figure it out together. The next week was war. Derek and his legal team worked around the clock, analyzing contracts, securing allies, looking for any weakness in Victor's position. Naomi stayed by his side, bringing coffee, forcing him to eat, reminding him to sleep when exhaustion threatened to break him. She also did something he did not expect. She called Victor Hale. The meeting took place in a small cafe far from the glittering towers of the financial district. Victor arrived in a suit that cost more than most people's cars, his smile sharp as a blade. Mrs. Ashford, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. I must admit, I did not expect this invitation. I am not Mrs. Ashford yet, Naomi said calmly, and I wanted to talk to you before that changes. Victor raised an eyebrow. About what? About what you really want. The conversation lasted an hour. Victor was smooth, charming, exactly the kind of predator who wore sheep's clothing with practiced ease. He talked about business and legacy and the natural order of things. He talked about Derek's father, about the old ways, about the importance of strength over sentiment. But Naomi listened beneath his words. She heard the insecurity hiding under the confidence. She saw the jealousy lurking behind the ambition. She understood, finally, what drove Victor Hale. He did not want the company. He wanted to matter. So she made him an offer. Not money, not power, something far more valuable. Recognition. She proposed a partnership. A foundation in Victor's father's name, funded by both families, focused on the causes Victor claimed to care about. A public acknowledgement of his contributions to the industry, a seat at the table that did not require destroying the table itself. Victor was skeptical at first, hostile, but she kept talking, kept listening, kept finding the human being beneath the monster. By the end of the hour, he had agreed to withdraw his takeover bid. When Naomi told Derek that night, he stared at her like she had performed a miracle. How did you do that? He asked. I listened, she said simply. I heard what he actually wanted, underneath all the noise, and I gave it to him. Derek pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. You are extraordinary, he whispered into her hair. Do you know that? I am learning, she replied. 6 months later, everything was different. Marcus's treatment had been declared a success. The cancer was in full remission. He was back in school, studying architecture, building the future he had almost lost. Derek's company was thriving. The partnership with Victor had evolved into something almost resembling respect. The board was stable, the legacy was secure, and Naomi had become someone she barely recognized. Her second exhibition had just opened, this one titled Home. The paintings were warmer now, full of light and color and hope. Critics called it a transformation, a rebirth, a love letter written in brushstrokes. The centerpiece was her largest work yet. 2 figures on a sunlit terrace, hands intertwined, faces turned toward each other like the rest of the world had simply stopped existing. She had titled it Beginning. Derek proposed on the night of the opening. Not in front of the crowd, not for the cameras, but quietly in the back room of the gallery, surrounded by paintings that told the story of how they had found each other. He got down on one knee and pulled out a ring that was not his mother's. This one was new, chosen just for her, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. Naomi Carter, he said, his voice steady even though his hands were shaking, you walked into my life when I needed you most. You saw through every lie I told the world and found the truth I was hiding even from myself. You fought for me. You believed in me. You loved me when I had forgotten how to be loved. He took her hand. I do not have the words to tell you what you mean to me, he continued, but I have the rest of my life to try. Will you marry me? Naomi looked at this man who had started as a desperate stranger and become her everything. She thought about the night they met, the fear and the champagne and the impossible request. She thought about all the moments since, the hard ones and the beautiful ones, the tears and the laughter, and the quiet mornings when nothing needed to be said. She thought about her mother's words, "Do not let fear make your decisions." And she said yes. The wedding was small, intimate, nothing like the grand spectacles that billionaires usually produced. They married in a garden on a September afternoon, surrounded by the handful of people who actually mattered. Marcus stood at Naomi's side, healthy and whole and grinning so wide his face must have hurt. Derek's few true friends filled the chairs, people who had known him before the money, before the name, before the walls went up. Naomi wore a simple dress the color of cream. Derek wore a suit without a tie. They wrote their own vows and cried through both readings. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Derek kissed her like the world was ending and beginning all at once. The reception lasted until midnight. They danced under strings of lights while the city glowed in the distance. They ate cake and drank champagne and laughed at stories they had heard 100 times before. And when it was over, when the last guest had gone and the last light had been extinguished, Derek led Naomi to the balcony where they had first met. They stood there in silence, looking out at the city that had brought them together. "Do you remember," Naomi said softly, "what you said to me that night?" Derek smiled. "I said a lot of things that night, most of them desperate. You said you needed someone who was not there for the money or the power or the name. Someone who was just there." He nodded, "I remember." She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "I need you to know something," she said. "I am not here for any of those things. I would love you if you lost everything tomorrow. I would love you if we had to start over in a one-bedroom apartment with nothing but each other. I would love you if you were the one serving champagne and I was the stranger asking impossible favors." "I know," Derek said quietly. "Do you?" He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yes," he said. "I know, because that is exactly how you have loved me from the beginning. Without conditions, without expectations, without any of the masks I spent my whole life hiding behind." He kissed her forehead. "You see me," he whispered. "The real me, and somehow, impossibly, you love what you see." Naomi smiled through the tears that were streaming down her face. "I do," she said. "I really, really do." They stood there until the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day, a new chapter, a new beginning. And this time neither of them was pretending. 2 years later. The nursery was painted in soft blues and greens, colors that reminded Naomi of the ocean she had never seen until Derek took her there on their honeymoon. A mobile of paper stars hung above the crib, spinning slowly in the breeze from the open window. She stood in the doorway, one hand resting on her swollen belly, watching Derek assemble a rocking chair that had arrived in approximately 700 pieces. "You know we could hire someone for this," she said, trying not to laugh. Derek looked up, a screwdriver in one hand and confusion written all over his face. "Absolutely not," he said. "I am going to build something with my own hands for my son, even if it kills me." "It might," Naomi observed. "You have been working on that chair for 3 hours. It is a complicated chair." She crossed the room and lowered herself carefully onto the floor beside him. The baby kicked as she settled, a tiny foot pressing against her ribs in protest. "He is active today," she said, taking Derek's hand and pressing it to her belly. Derek's face softened the way it always did when he felt their son move. "He is going to be a fighter," he said, "like his mother." "Or stubborn," Naomi countered. "Like his father," Derek grinned. "Probably both." They sat there on the nursery floor, surrounded by chair parts and assembly instructions, feeling their son dance beneath their joined hands. "I still cannot believe this is real," Derek said quietly. "What do you mean?" He gestured around the room. "The nursery, the baby, you." 3 years ago, I was alone in a ballroom full of people, convinced that no one would ever see me as anything other than a name or a number. And now you are sitting on the floor failing to build furniture," Naomi finished. He laughed. "Yes, and I would not trade it for anything." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Neither would I." Elijah Marcus Ashford was born on a rainy Tuesday in April. He arrived at 3 in the morning, screaming with all the fury of someone who had been rudely interrupted. He had his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. He was, without question, the most beautiful thing either of them had ever seen. Derek held him first, standing by the hospital window while rain streaked down the glass. Naomi watched from the bed, exhausted but unable to close her eyes, unwilling to miss a single moment. "He is perfect," Derek whispered, his voice cracking. "He is loud," Naomi corrected weakly. Derek laughed, tears streaming down his face. "He is that too." He brought Elijah to her, settling the tiny bundle in her arms. Naomi looked down at her son's face, at the miracle they had created together, and felt something unlock in her chest. For years she had been afraid of loss, afraid of love, afraid of wanting things she might not get to keep. But looking at Elijah now, she understood something she had never fully grasped before. Love was not safe, it was not guaranteed, it did not come with promises or warranties or backup plans, but it was worth it anyway. Every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. Worth it. "Welcome to the world," she whispered to her son. "We have been waiting for you." 1 year later. The painting hung above the fireplace in their living room, Naomi's largest work, her most personal, the piece she had sworn never to sell. Home. 2 figures on a sunlit terrace, hands intertwined. But it had changed since the exhibition. She had added to it over the months, small details that only she and Derek would notice. A 3rd figure now, tiny and perfect, cradled between them. A family complete. Elijah was walking now, toddling across the room with the determination of someone who had not yet learned that falling was possible. Derek chased after him, scooping him up and spinning him around until the apartment filled with giggles. Naomi watched from the doorway of her studio, a paintbrush still in her hand, her heart so full it hurt. She thought about the night everything began. The shattered champagne glass, the desperate stranger, the impossible request that had become an improbable truth. "Pretend to be my wife," he had said. And she had. For 1 night, for 1 hour, for what was supposed to be a simple transaction. But somewhere between the lie and the truth, something real had taken root, something that had grown stronger with every challenge, deeper with every moment, more certain with every day. She was not pretending anymore. She was home. Derek looked up and caught her watching. He smiled, that soft, private smile that was only for her, and mouthed 2 words across the room. "Love you." She mouthed it back. "Love you more." And in the space between them, their son laughed at something only he understood, and the sunlight streamed through the windows, and everything was exactly as it was meant to be. Family, we have come to the end of this story. Thank you for staying with me through every twist, every turn, every moment of heartbreak and hope. I hope this story reminded you of something important. That love finds you when you least expect it. That second chances are real. That sometimes the most beautiful truths grow from the most desperate lies. If this story touched your heart, drop a comment below telling me your favorite moment. Was it the night they met? The hospital visits? The proposal? The birth of their son? I want to hear from you. Hit that like button if you believe in love against all odds, subscribe if you have not already, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their story is not over yet. Thank you for being part of this family. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing. Until next time, stay blessed, stay hopeful, and never, ever stop believing in love. Goodbye for now. The end.